There's a certain kind of loneliness that doesn't look like loneliness at all. It's quiet, it's structured. It hides behind busy schedules, full-time jobs, and a face that says, "I've got it handled." It's the kind of loneliness you see in a man who hasn't had a real conversation with another human being in weeks, but would never admit it. Even when his evenings are silent, his phone is still, and his chest carries a weight he doesn't have a name for. You've probably met someone like that. Maybe you are someone like that. They're the ones who show up every day, who provide, who hold things together for everyone around them while something inside them is slowly going hollow. They don't complain. They don't reach out. They don't ask for help. Because somewhere along the way, they learned that needing people is the one thing a man is never supposed to do. So they build a life that looks full from the outside: work, routine, discipline. But behind that structure is a silence so deep it echoes. Psychologically, this isn't laziness or antisocial behavior. Male loneliness isn't about a man who can't find people. It's about a man who was never taught that he's allowed to need them. It starts early, usually somewhere in boyhood, long before the loneliness has a name. Maybe when he cried, someone said, "Man up." Maybe when he tried to talk about his feelings, the room went quiet. Maybe he watched his own father carry everything alone and learned that this is what strength is supposed to look like. So he adapted. He learned that vulnerability was a liability, that closeness required an excuse, and that a man's worth was measured not by who he let in, but by how much he could carry without asking for help. It's strange, isn't it? We tell boys to be brave, to be tough, to hold it together. And then we wonder why grown men don't know how to ask for connection. We celebrate the man who needs no one. We admire the one who handles everything himself. But we rarely stop to ask what that kind of independence actually costs. Because every time a man swallows what he's feeling, he's not just hiding emotion. He's burying a need. He's training his own nervous system to treat closeness as a threat. And over time, he's not just alone. He's forgotten how to be anything else. The psychology behind it is something researchers call normative male alexithymia, a difficulty in identifying and expressing emotions that isn't born, it's built. Built by years of being told that feelings are for other people. Studies show that men report fewer close friendships than women, fewer people they can call in a crisis, and fewer moments of emotional honesty in an average week. But the paradox is that men don't need connection less than anyone else. Their biology craves it just as deeply. They've simply been conditioned to deny the craving until it disappears from the surface, even though underneath it's still running. It's a silent loop, one that feeds on shame. Shame of being seen as weak. Shame of admitting you're lonely. Shame of needing someone in a world that taught you that needing is failing. And so they keep going. They keep working late. They keep filling weekends with tasks. They keep answering, "I'm good," so many times that the words lose all meaning. They play the role so convincingly that even they start to forget they're performing. But deep down, there's a quiet hollowing out. Not the kind that noise can fill, but the kind that comes from living your entire life within arm's reach of people and still feeling fundamentally unknown. There's an internal contradiction that grows inside men who carry their loneliness in silence. On the surface, they appear capable, steady, even self-sufficient. But beneath that surface is a quiet starvation that never stops. Their mind becomes a tug of war between the man they were taught to perform and the human being underneath who just wants to be known. You can often recognize them in small ways. They're the ones who keep conversations surface level, who steer away from anything that might require honesty. The ones who respond to, "How are you doing, really?" with a joke or a subject change. The ones who sit in a room full of people and still feel like they're watching from behind glass. Psychologists describe this pattern as relational withdrawal, a gradual retreat from emotional intimacy that happens so slowly a man may not even realize it's occurring. It doesn't start as a dramatic exit. It starts as a missed call he doesn't return, a friendship he lets quietly fade, a conversation he ends before it gets too real. Over time, this withdrawal becomes structure. It becomes routine. And once that happens, it doesn't feel like loneliness anymore. It just feels like life. But what's remarkable and often misunderstood is that these men aren't cold. They're starving. Every time they deflect a personal question, they're using the only emotional vocabulary they were ever given. They've learned to manage isolation by turning it into independence. If they don't reach out, they can't be rejected. If they don't need anyone, no one can let them down. If they keep the world at arm's length, at least the silence is predictable. But that predictability always comes at a cost. Research consistently links chronic social isolation in men to higher rates of cardiovascular disease, substance abuse, depression, and significantly shorter life expectancy. Male loneliness isn't just an emotional inconvenience. It is, by every clinical measure, a health crisis hiding in plain sight. Because the need for connection doesn't disappear when a man ignores it. It waits. It waits in the silence after the workday ends. It waits in the apartment where no one asks how he's doing. It waits in the 2 a.m. stillness, where the only company left is his own mind, replaying every conversation he almost had, but didn't. It's not uncommon for men living inside this kind of loneliness to develop what psychologists call emotional desertification, a slow drying out of the inner world. Not because a man has nothing to feel, but because he's gone so long without expressing it that the emotional landscape starts to flatten. Joy gets quieter, sadness gets harder to name, and the space between "I'm fine" and what's actually happening grows wider every year. It's what happens when a man's emotional energy goes not toward living, but toward managing. Managing his image, managing his silence, managing the distance between himself and anyone who might actually see him. And here's where it shows up most painfully: in his relationships. Many lonely men don't lack people in their lives. They lack depth with those people. They might have a partner who's never seen them cry. Friends they've known for 20 years but have never once talked to about what keeps them up at night. Family members who praise them for being the strong one without ever realizing that the strong one hasn't been asked how he's doing in months. They give presents but never receive it. They offer support but never request it. They become the pillar everyone leans on, while quietly wondering if anyone would notice if the pillar started cracking. And yet, deep down, beneath all that stoicism, there's a hunger so quiet it barely makes a sound. They want to be known, not admired, not respected, known, in the way that someone sees past the composure and says, "You don't have to hold it together right now." It's ironic, isn't it? The men who seem the most self-sufficient are often the ones most desperate for tenderness. The ones who never call are often the ones most hoping someone will call them. And the ones who say, "I don't need anyone," are often carrying a loneliness so deep it has become the background noise of their entire life. But the world doesn't make it easy. We live in a culture that celebrates male stoicism over male honesty, emotional control over emotional truth, independence over intimacy. We tell boys to toughen up, and then we wonder why grown men don't know how to soften. So they keep going. They keep providing, performing, producing, until one day something breaks. And when it does, everyone around them says the same thing. "I had no idea he was struggling." Of course not. Because no one ever asked. Now let's create a loop here, because you might be wondering if a man has spent his entire life building walls around his loneliness. Can anyone ever actually reach him? Can someone love him in a way that he finally feels safe enough to stop performing? Hold on to that thought, because I'll come back to it. But first, we need to explore something even more curious. Why male loneliness doesn't just cut a man off from other people. Over time, it cuts him off from himself. Here's the paradox. The man who appears the most self-reliant is often the one who has lost the most access to his own inner world. When a man lives inside his loneliness for long enough, he begins to split into two versions of himself. The one he shows to the world, capable, composed, unbothered, and the one that exists in silence when the front door closes. At first, the separation feels manageable. It's like living in a house where only one room is ever lit. The rest stays dark, but at least the outside looks fine. But over time, those two versions start drifting so far apart that he can't tell which one is real anymore. The man at work who laughs on cue starts to feel like a character. The man who sits alone in the car for 10 extra minutes before going inside starts to feel like the only honest version left. Psychologists call this emotional incongruence, the gap between what you express and what you actually feel. And in men, that gap can stretch across an entire adult life without anyone noticing. So that's the pattern. Loneliness builds, he manages it, life goes on. But here's where it gets even deeper, because there's a strange comfort in being alone when you've been alone long enough. It gives you a sense of control. No one can disappoint you if you don't let them in. No one can leave if they were never close enough to matter. And for a while, that control feels like power. But there's a cost that builds silently underneath. Male loneliness doesn't just disconnect a man from others. Over time, it disconnects him from himself. He stops trusting his own emotional responses. He starts second-guessing whether his sadness is even valid. He begins to believe that if no one else sees the loneliness, maybe it isn't real. And that's where the danger quietly lives. Because when emotional isolation goes on long enough, it doesn't stay emotional. It becomes physical. The body doesn't know how to lie, even when the man has become fluent in it. Sometimes it shows up as a heaviness in the chest that no doctor can explain. Sometimes as insomnia, as drinking one more than he meant to, as a slow withdrawal from things he used to enjoy. It's the body whispering, "Please stop pretending this is enough." And the cruelest part is this: things that once brought him joy begin to feel muted. A weekend feels like something to survive, not enjoy. Music plays but doesn't land the way it used to. Laughter comes, but it leaves quickly, like a guest who knows they're in the wrong house. It's not that he doesn't want to feel. It's that his emotional bandwidth has been drained from years of managing silence instead of breaking it. And yet, from the outside, he looks fine, maybe even admirable. He's the dependable one, the self-made one, the one who never needs anything from anyone. And that's the hardest truth of all. The loneliest men in the world are often the most praised for exactly the behavior that is slowly eroding them from the inside. And maybe that's the part no one is willing to say out loud. Because here's the paradox of male loneliness. It doesn't come from a man who failed at connection. It comes from a man who was taught that not needing connection was the highest form of success. He wasn't abandoned by people. He was trained to abandon his own need for them. And that training didn't make him stronger. It made him invisible. Not the kind of invisible where no one sees you. The kind where everyone sees you, everyone relies on you, everyone respects you, but no one knows you. And invisibility inside a crowd is a loneliness so specific, so silent, that it doesn't even have a name most men would recognize. Because how can anyone reach a man who was taught that being reached for is weakness? How can anyone hold someone who has spent a lifetime proving he doesn't need to be held? How can anyone love him fully when the most honest parts of him have never been allowed into the room? That is not independence. That is a man so fluent in isolation that he's forgotten it's a language he was forced to learn. And this is why, paradoxically, the men who carry the most loneliness are often the ones surrounded by the most people. Because only someone who has been performing self-sufficiency for decades can look perfectly fine while something inside him is quietly starving. Only someone who has never been asked, "What do you actually need?" can keep providing without ever receiving. Only someone who learned as a boy that his tears made the room uncomfortable can sit in a room full of love and still feel entirely alone. Now let's come back to that question we left open. Can anyone ever actually reach a man who has spent his entire life building walls around his loneliness? Can someone love him in a way that he finally feels safe enough to stop performing? To answer that, we need to go back to where this pattern was born. Not in adulthood, not in his 20s, much earlier than that. Imagine a boy who once tried to reach out. Maybe he came home from school one day with tears in his eyes, and instead of being held, he was told to shake it off. Maybe he watched his father sit alone every evening, never talking, never asking for anything, and understood without words that this is what a man looks like. Maybe he was the boy who tried to hug a friend and was laughed at, or the one who wrote something honest and was told that boys don't talk like that. That boy learned something no one sat him down to teach, that his tenderness was a liability, that his need for closeness was something to outgrow. And that the safest version of himself was the one that needed no one at all. Fast forward, that boy is now 25, or 35, or 50, and the rule is still running. This is why male loneliness can feel almost nostalgic. It carries echoes of a time when he was small enough to want to be held and young enough to believe that someone would come. And that ache isn't just memory. Neurologically, the patterns of emotional suppression formed in boyhood don't dissolve with age. They wire themselves into the nervous system, becoming the default response to any moment that feels vulnerable. It is his nervous system still whispering, "Don't reach out. The last time you did, it cost you something. Stay quiet, stay safe, stay alone." But here's what that boy could never have known. He was not broken for wanting connection. He was adapted to a world that punished him for it. And the loneliness he carries now, the silence, the distance, the performing, it was never a character flaw. It was the boy still whispering, "I wanted someone to ask me how I was feeling. I wanted someone to stay when I couldn't say what was wrong. I wanted to be allowed to need someone without it meaning I was weak." And maybe that's what makes this silence so important to understand. Not because it needs to be fixed with advice or forced into conversation, but because something inside that silence is finally asking to be witnessed. Maybe healing for a lonely man doesn't look like suddenly opening up to everyone. Maybe it looks like sitting in a room and finally allowing himself to admit, "I'm tired of carrying this alone, and I don't know how to say that out loud." Maybe it looks like placing his hand against his own chest in a quiet apartment and giving himself the very thing no one ever taught him he was allowed to receive: his own compassion. It is the longing to stop performing strength, to stop measuring his worth by how little he needs, to simply exist as a full human being who is allowed to ache without apology. So the next time the loneliness rises, not as noise but as that familiar quiet weight in the chest, welcome it. Sit with it as if it were an old companion bringing news from a boy who never got to finish his sentence. Listen to what it carries. It may carry the fatigue of decades spent managing silence instead of breaking it. It may carry the grief of friendships that stayed shallow because depth felt too dangerous. It may simply ask him to rest, to stop performing, to let one person, even just himself, see what's actually there. And though it may feel heavy, remember that heaviness is not here to crush him. It is here to slow him down long enough to finally feel what he's been outrunning his entire life. Because at its core, male loneliness is not about being alone. It is about truth. It is about honoring the parts of a man that were never given permission to exist in front of another person. It is about giving himself the right to need, to ache, to reach, without that meaning he has failed at being a man. And through that, it is about becoming whole, not by becoming someone louder, but by finally allowing the quiet parts of himself to be heard. So if today you're a man sitting in a quiet room, wondering why the silence feels so loud, don't fight it. Don't tell yourself you should be stronger than this. Don't punish yourself for needing what every human being on earth was born to need. Sit with it. Breathe with it. Let it remind you of the boy who never stopped reaching, even when the world told him to pull his hand back. For in that loneliness lives your tenderness, your honesty, and your deeply human hunger to be known. Male loneliness is not the end of connection. It is the doorway that allows connection to return, not as performance, but as something finally, quietly real.